Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm very lucky today to be able to sit down with Yonatan Sela. He's from Props. Very pleased for him to take the time, sit down, tell us a little bit about his background, his experience in cryptocurrency, and also what Props is doing and how he came to be here at Epicenter 2019. So, Yonatan, thank you so much for taking the time, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Highly appreciate it,
Appreciate it.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to be here today.
I took a flight from New York.
Oh, okay.
And we're based out there. I co-founded a project called Props, which is intended to help users on the internet to become financial stakeholders in the apps they're contributing to.
Sure.
So the internet is full of two-sided marketplaces and networks where users are generating content or doing some other form of work or giving attention or spending time and effort, and that adds a lot of value for those networks. So you take, for example, Snapchat. Without the people creating the content, creating stories, it wouldn't be that valuable. However, oftentimes you don't see that value flowing back to these users. So when Snapchat IPOs for $25 billion, $0 end up in the hands of content creators who contributed to that growth. So the idea behind Props is to enable greater value transfer to these people, but doing so in a way that strengthens the network and aligns with the interests of the developers of these applications. So they're able to build a stronger network with greater alignment that everybody can benefit more from. So in the case of Instagram launching stories, you wouldn't see an exodus of creators from Snapchat to Instagram because the creators on Snapchat will be like shareholders of sorts on Snapchat. So these are not shares, but the concept is the same. They have an upside in the success of the network. Their financial success is tied to the amount of impact they've had on the network as users. And we've created an open source protocol to enable regular apps to deploy the Props token in with super easy tools. They keep on doing their own thing, but they're adding Props as a form of what we call loyalty capital. It gives the users who earn it for activity in the app some in-app benefits, and it ends up having a financial upside potential for the users that are holding it. Mm-hmm. That's in short, and the idea behind it came after running a virtual economy since 2014 that wasn't based on a cryptocurrency, but on a virtual currency used by millions of people, selling over $70 million worth of that currency to users in-app, and managing that economy, which was also a two-sided marketplace. So we learned a lot from that, and in 2017, we wanted to take that to the next level and enable any app to deploy something like that, and created Props.
So the way that I understand what you're trying to build here, or what you guys have built, is essentially a way to incentivize users of social platforms, in the example that you talked about, to stay with the platform, to not migrate elsewhere just because there might be a better feature, when there's a high likelihood that the app that they're on or the platform that they're on will add that in the future as well if it is attractive.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it, and it applies to more than just the social use case or the digital media use case, which is a strong use case, and the first ones we're seeing. The first 3 apps on this network are all digital media apps, but now B2B, two-sided marketplace for sales of items, like a small version of P2P eBay. Mm-hmm. is
You said P2P Alphabet?
No.
Okay, I was just checking.
But the idea is that a ride-sharing app could use it, a gaming app could use it, anywhere where you have power users contributing outsized value to the app and helping everybody else and the developers of the app essentially generate much more value or revenue or engagement on the network.
Do you feel that the model that YouTube currently uses to incentivize its content creators with actually giving them ad revenue? And on top of that, so there's one aspect, like what's wrong with that model? And also, the way that I understand it, generally larger influencers on platforms, their largest reward is generally what we would consider unpredictable or unaccountable benefits. For example, having a large net of influence generally gives one a lot of pull, a lot of sway, generally gives them a lot of sponsorships, gives them a lot of partnerships, and we've seen this with Twitch, with very popular gamers. We've seen this with YouTube content creators, very popular streamers. So, what's wrong with that model?
So the internet really has 2 types of these networks. One of them has zero compensation for content creators. That's Snapchat or Instagram or those kind of networks, and many other content networks. Then there's the type where there is some dollar-based or fiat-based compensation for usually between 0.5 to 2% of the network, and that's YouTube, Twitch, and Airbnb and Uber and all those networks, Fiverr, Upwork, all these networks have a tiny subset of the supply-siders earning flat revenue. But just like I told you the story about Snapchat creators being super upset and ultimately many of them leaving the platform, when Uber IPOs for $60 billion, drivers were still protesting on the street because they kept on earning the $10 an hour rather than also having some share in the success of the network. So the power law there just doesn't add up. So we're doing two things. One, we're enabling those networks to reward much more than the 1% that they're currently rewarding. And two, we're enabling them to give them a stake in the network, which appreciates if the network grows. So if you get an outstanding return, which in large part has to do with the work of these users, then those users are getting some of that back. Just like the personal assistant or the office manager at Uber had stock options as well as her salary, we're offering the same model. So we're not saying that dollar payments are bad in any way. In fact, we've been running a video app called YouNow for 6 years before we got into props with a virtual currency that gives dollar payments. And we've sold more than $70 million worth of that currency to users and shared about half of that with content creators. But that was only less than 1% of content creators. And as this network grows, they have no part of that upside. So the idea is to introduce, again, it's not equity, but it's equity-like component into applications that will make the whole system far more just and aligned, which makes each one of these networks also more defensible and more robust in the long term.
So you're talking about, again, incentivizing individuals to stay on their platform. And you talked about giving them a piece of the success of the network, right? And you specifically mentioned the IPO model of, when Snapchat goes public or Uber goes public, the drivers aren't receiving, a piece of that financial reward, and they're the ones that built the network in the first place. They're the ones that contributed to it being valuable enough to sell off.
Exactly.
And so, but my question though is, with props, it wouldn't be possible, or I think even legal perhaps, to give them actually that financial kickback from the sale of the IPO as shareholders. So again, explain to me a little bit better, and am I correct in assuming that, and how is props actually kind of making true on that promise of giving individuals that financial piece of the network?
Right, so if you'd see CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, about a year ago or so, said that they're trying to give shares to to hosts of Airbnb, and that was just impossible to do because you can't do that with stocks to millions and millions of people.
Sure.
But with crypto you can. And the part of the way you can do that is not by giving equity to people in the network, but rather creating a crypto economic business model that says the following. I'm going to create a scarce asset that is tied to the growth rate of the network. For example, the more revenue comes in, the more users come in, the more mind share is spent on the network, a token that unlocks benefits on that network but has a limited amount, will become more valuable per piece. So as more and more applications join this network, and currently there are 750,000 users for the token, and as more applications join by the end of the year, we're expecting to cross the 1 million user mark. As additional applications join, as additional utilities get unlocked by the same number of tokens, the utility value that users place on that token is higher, and hopefully that's reflected on market price if the market works properly. So the idea is that by integrating the same scarce asset that unlocks more real-world services, the dollar value of that asset increases, and that's how you create that pretty strong relationship between the size of this network and the value of the token.
So you're talking about giving essentially great token economics to a cryptocurrency that a user of a platform would hold to directly benefit from the speculative increase of the value of the token, essentially.
Yeah, and it's theoretically, let's remove all speculation and say that for a minute, like as if there's no speculation, just from the utility value, as you're adding more apps and more use cases for this token, same amount of tokens, you're going to see more intrinsic value for that token. Now, speculators will view that activity and either intensify it or counter it, but
sure.
That's the idea about how the token accrues the value. Now, interestingly, what we're doing is that the props function like loyalty capital. So essentially you're getting the apps that are participating on the network, each and every one of them defines how they're allocating props. The protocol rewards apps based on how many props tokens users staked to these apps. The apps reward their users based on their own internal setup. So for example, on the first app on this network called YouNow, it's a live video app, the more views you get and the more likes you get as a content creator, the more props you earn. Also, the more you pay dollars to support these content creators as a viewer, the more props you earn. You're injecting value into that system, so the YouNow app decides to reward you with these props. As you look at several applications on the network that have completely different use cases potentially, they are measured by the protocol in an algorithmic way. They receive protocol rewards daily based on how many tokens their users have staked to them. And what that means is that the more valuable benefits these apps give to props holders, the more props holders will stake tokens to those apps to get those real world services. So what you end up with after doing that for millions and millions of people over several years, you end up with the biggest power users of these apps holding a lot of these tokens in order to unlock real world services in stuff they're already doing every day, even before props. And
that's probably contributing to them being power users.
Exactly. And those people who are holding these props to get a better revenue share on those apps, discounts, higher status, exclusive items, exclusive features, etc. Those people are the ones most likely to continue to want that service because they've been there in the first place for that. And you end up with a currency that's securitized by all these services that all these apps are offering their biggest power users. And that creates a very strong base of holders of this token that are excited about continuing to rip the direct dollar benefits they're getting from it by day-to-day usage of these apps.
What's interesting about this model is that props as a cryptocurrency would be universal across all these platforms.
Yes.
It's a protocol that's going to be implemented. So you could, in theory, hold props. Let's say that Twitter implements props, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
that
Twitter.
That would be great.
Twitter, yeah, that would be great. If you're listening, make sure.
Jack.
So, if Twitter were to implement props, then Twitter would be in control of setting what are the incentives that props users would get.
Yes.
And essentially, you're looking for a successful social network that is utilizing props. The more successful the network gets, the more valuable the props token would be.
Yes, but the growth is not limited to just how successful each of the applications are. Let's assume for a minute that each of these applications is pretty stable or growing at 3% a year. It doesn't mean that props value is either stable or growing at 3% a year because of another force that's happening here, which is every incremental app that gets added to this network adds millions of additional people,
right,
and another use case for the token, generating additional demand.
So there's a network effect on top of a network effect.
Yes, and the idea is that even if each of them are stable, the growth rate can still be very high for the network as a whole.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what I find really interesting about this conversation is that you are one of the few projects that I've talked to who is talking about their token from a token economic standpoint. Most, or I don't want to say most, but many projects that I've spoken to start talking about their token generally in the form of this was used to raise revenue, this was raised to raise capital, and we're trying to give some incentives to the users to hold the token, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, a lot of individuals have utilized tokens as a fundraising mechanism.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't approach it that way. I mean, the way it sounds like you designed props from the ground up was a token economic model. Otherwise, it doesn't work very well. That's the whole basis of your point is hold this token, it increases in value and gives you features on the platform.
Yes, and most of the users today, again, 750,000 people today are using this token already on a regular video app. And in a month's time, we're going to see almost triple that amount of potential users and certainly of actual users in a couple months by the integration of the token to additional regular apps. And those people, most of the users in those apps don't even know that what they are receiving, this what we call loyalty capital, what they're receiving is not, they're not even aware of the fact that it is a cryptocurrency. They just think of it as loyalty points inside the app. The savvy ones, the power users to whom we communicate, the app communicates and have like a deeper understanding of the small mechanics of the app, they understand it because it's everywhere in the communications. But for the casual user who doesn't necessarily pay attention to everything, and when this thing is still young in age, then they're just using it for the in-app benefit, which is really what we want to see across the board. The financial value is a derivative of the real world value, not vice versa. And the virtuous cycle is created with these power users who are aware of it, because now the biggest spenders on this video app, the spenders of real dollar cash inside the app, as well as the biggest content creators on that app, the biggest supply siders. These groups are aware and have increased their activity. 25% more content has been created in the past 4 months since this thing has been introduced compared to previous months, and about 40% increase in revenue, in dollar revenue for the app, because of this kickback to the payers on the app that are earning the token. So the token is able to influence the power users on these regular apps, increase their engagement or spending, and thereby generate business results for the app while creating the right kind of distribution for the token.
So not only is there an incentive for the token holders, there's an incentive for the platform as well to integrate props.
Yes.
And you guys have real world data to show that with the platform now.
Yes. And I'd also love to show you a demo of how this looks like in a regular app if we have the time for it.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically this is the video app. There's all sorts of streamers here creating content. And what we're seeing here is, for example, let's go to this guy. He's doing a special Halloween broadcast. This is a regular live streaming use case. He's got about 26 viewers. He's been on for an hour and 50 minutes. The biggest earners of props on the platform are people like him. He's the content creator. The more views and likes he gets, the more props he earns. But also the payers who are sending regular virtual items or tips. So for example, I can send a tip here in a dollar tip. When I send him the tip, watch what happens. You see there is 1.55 props are being added to my account.
Okay.
And now he gets the regular revenue share, but he also gets more props as more people send him likes like I just did. And me as a payer, I go to my props dashboard, I see that this transaction has been registered on chain. This 1.55 was just registered here, and I've accumulated a lot of props here over the years, and I can see that what props unlock for me is all sorts of virtual items. They unlock discounts and better revenue share for content creators are being rolled out. So all these benefits that tie into regular app utility are created through my props balance. Now, when I want to claim these props, I can go to my wallet. There's a nice integration here with Coinbase wallet, and I can essentially claim these props. Oh, I have a claim in progress because I was just doing another demo, but basically I can now claim them settle them to Ethereum, and now go and do whatever I want with them, even outside of this app, or go and utilize them on another app on the network that enables props benefits. So this is how the thing works. It's not a medium of exchange token. As you can see, we keep on using dollars, or if an app has an in-app currency, or if it has a subscription model, can continue to use it. But props power the social cap. They're more akin to capital. The more of it you have, the more benefits you have, the more you can yield regular income, the more and if you want, you can liquidate some of it, take it out, and benefit from an ongoing VIP experience wherever you go inside the props apps. But you don't need to spend your props. You'd rather accumulate them for status and for benefits. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea.
So in this model, it's very easy to move props from YouNow to Twitch, from Twitch to Twitter, and back and forth. Or is it going to be the same wallet across all platforms?
You can come and with any props app, and I hope that one day Twitch and Twitter will also enable users to get benefits for props. But let's say
you just need to watch the video. It's going to be okay.
But in the shorter term, more medium-sized apps with millions of users, maybe not as gigantic as those, as Twitch and Twitter, but apps with millions of users are enabling users to come in with this wallet and basically utilize their props in the apps. Yeah, that's the idea.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like the idea. So props is also unique in the fact that you were the second, I believe, company developing a project in the United States to receive SEC A+ certification to host your token offering. Is that correct?
That's correct. Props is in many ways a utility token. It is not a digital security pointing to equity or debt in the standard form of the word. It is a utility token used across applications. But the US Securities and Exchange Commission basically says 99.9% of tokens are securities because of the Howey test and the implications that that has. So other than Bitcoin and Ether, and some could claim EOS, no other token has received this status of like, okay, the token is not a security.
Sure.
Formally only Bitcoin and Ether and stablecoins. But in order to operate here, even if you still want to maintain the same functionality and the same nature of a utility token that a token like Props or Stacks by Blockstack has, you can do the following, which is to qualify it, to make yourself a reporting entity. At least until you are sufficiently decentralized or regulation changes or whatever it is, and report information about the operation of the token and your financials, etc., and the information about how it works, and provide full disclosures for people using or buying this token. But the token keeps on functioning pretty much the same way it would have otherwise as a standard utility token that is not a security. Also, outside of the US, it functions regularly like a utility token. So you're able to keep the utility nature of the token, but at least for the time being, you are regulated like a company that is issued as security. And I believe that that's a framework that is a fit for many companies that have started building protocols, or for many foundations or public benefit corporations that have started building protocols. It's very hard to start off from a completely decentralized point. A story like Bitcoin's is extremely rare and difficult to do. And indeed, Bitcoin is not a security because there's no entity behind it. You can't point to any centralized authority that's running the show and has better information than everybody else. But on all networks besides Bitcoin and Ethereum, the SEC claims that's not the case. There should be a reporting entity. And we live here, we are compliant, we want to abide by the law, and we think the practical thing to do for someone like us is to qualify this thing as a security for the time being, and run with that, and work and qualify under the law. And that enables us to be in the market today and get things moving rather than waiting for regulation to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most interesting development in cryptocurrency space right now? We got a lot of interesting things going on. Obviously, we've got the United States and China trade war. We've got Bitfinex, obviously, in hot water with the New York Attorney General's office. We've got obviously this recent bull market run, and lately this kind of big dive down as well. You know, what do you think is just kind of what's catching your eye right
Philosophically,
now?
I found the whole Libra episode very interesting, because I think governments and also other people in positions of power have looked at crypto one way until that, and maybe have started to understand what's been brewing under here, which is a breakdown on the monopoly of money. And it's no longer necessarily the sovereign state that needs to have that monopoly in the eyes of people trying to create competing stable coins and currencies, or just in general competing digital assets. So Bitcoin is one fascinating phenomenon that we all know very well.
Sure.
Libra, I thought, was the first time that the authorities said, wait a second.
Yeah.
There's a 2.4 billion people network here that's saying that they're going to do stable money that's going to be kind of like the dollar, but also not just exactly the dollar. and the Fed's activity is going to have only tertiary impact on it,
right?
And the control is not for us. And wait, how does that work with taxes? How does that work with who controls the money supply? How does that control with who controls who can be banked and who can't be banked? How does that work with cross-border taxation, regulation, etc.? So when they caught that idea, I think that was a watershed moment, or at least a very unique moment in time when everybody jumped on their feet and said, we got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, what's happening here? And I think that it is interesting and unclear what will happen to Libra specifically, but in a way I think the genie is a little bit out of the bottle, in the sense that the idea that money is not a monopoly that only those with the nukes have, has come to the most serious point of threat until now. So I'm very excited about, very interested in seeing how this thing pans out.
Is it the straw that breaks the camel's back, essentially? We're on the verge of so many things with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, regulation, all these different projects, but there isn't this huge, massive adoption that we've wanted to see. And granted, we're 10 years in. There's a reason for that. It takes time for things to grow. It takes time to build networks. But again, 2.4 billion people, and that whole idea, getting people scratching their heads, and people in the mainstream, people that are not into this space, people that are not into cryptocurrency, for the first time having the conversations about, you mean we don't have to use dollars?
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is it's actually a return, Banks issued their own currencies for the majority of America's history, and it's only over the last 100 years or so that we've had a central entity issuing money, which is a return. So again, banks issuing their own currencies for quite a long time in the United States history, and then central banks issuing centralized currency following that. But they were just returning to a previous state of history, which was the King's Declaration of Gold, or the nation state's Declaration of Gold, right?
Yeah.
And gold and silver being basically sovereign money, but controlled and regulated and minted by the nation state. So it's kind of this shifting from centralized control to decentralized control to centralized control, and now it seems the pendulum, in my opinion, is switching back to decentralized control, and that's what excites me.
I hope that we can see more of that. I also think the vision laid out by the Chinese government is interesting and very different than what you think about
the digital renminbi.
Yeah, and I think that it is a good wake-up call in a way on which other way this thing could play out. And this technology does not, by definition, mean that we're going to end up with a decentralized future.
Does not.
And I think that's something to really pay attention to.
There's two big battles, centralization and decentralization. And in the same sense, but I consider it slightly different, the state versus the free market. That's the big difference here.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. And that's why, again, it's hard for me to jump on the bandwagon, as a lot of crypto people are, that Libra, no, it's Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, privacy issues. None of that matters because you're focusing on the agent and not the idea, in my opinion. The idea is, let's say that Libra becomes a massively successful stablecoin with all of Facebook and all the associated entities' drawbacks and downfalls. You're still moving power away from the state into the free market, and the free market will decide. We can fix the free market. I think if you get rid of some government control, consumers can fix the free market a lot better than regulation can. So my hope's on the free market and decentralization, but
I also think that a lot of people in crypto, for reasons I understand, but I think it's not always the right application of the right ideas, they are focusing on how to they're putting a stake in the ground about a fully decentralized, pure future with certain form of governance that, and they're putting that flag on that hill. But in order to get there, I think a lot of things need to happen in the real world, and the real world is messy.
It is
and
very
the real
messy.
world has a lot of existing power structures. So I'm a big believer in a practical approach of getting into the right future and of getting more and more wins along the way. And Bitcoin is one win for that approach.
It's a big one.
And it has done it in such a special way. But now, in order to move more of us and more of the economy into that area, you need to work with the existing power structures. So that's why, for example, some projects are choosing to work with the regulator.
Sure.
and then still provide pretty much the same value to consumers, even if you have some trade-offs in doing that kind of process. Some other projects will be, most projects in crypto have some degree of centralization, which enables them to move fast, to build things, and to over time distribute the power. That's also another trade-off. So it doesn't, and nothing starts as, or very few things can start as purely decentralized, purely on their own, playing by their own rules as an international, global thing that is not attached to any physical location and physical law in any specific country. And I think that the idea of trying to work with the existing power structures is needed in order for crypto to reach many more people. I think a lot of players are seeing that. Some of the most successful players like Coinbase have been doing that for many years. Even Binance has, I think, learned that there's a limit to the amount of people and amount of capital that can go through their platform and to the size of their business and impact if they don't work with the regulators to some extent. So I think we're seeing a maturation in a way, or development in the crypto space of that understanding, and more established players coming in, as well as some of the native players understanding that they need to work with the regulator or with the existing or other existing structures.
Well, I'm definitely interested to see, again, how this battle between central and decentral plays out, my friend.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place. Yonatan, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate the conversation. It was a good one.